On our fourth wedding anniversary, my husband clipped a silver bracelet around my wrist and smiled like he had just given me the moon. "Now I can always keep my little wife safe," he said. I smiled back, because that was what I had learned to do in my marriage. Smile when his mother corrected me. Smile when his brother talked over me. Smile when his office manager stood too close to him. Smile when my father's name slowly disappeared from the business he had built with his bare hands. But later that night, while Blake was upstairs taking a shower, I held the bracelet under the kitchen light and noticed something strange inside the largest charm. A tiny black dot. Not a scratch. Not decoration. A lens. The next morning, my old friend Nate opened that charm in the back of his phone repair shop, looked at what was hidden inside, and went completely pale. "Hannah," he said, "this isn't just a tracker." My mouth went dry. It records sound, too. I thought my husband was spying on me because he was having an affair. I was wrong. The bracelet was not about another woman. It was about my father. It was about the little white workshop behind our old house. The one with the green metal roof and the pencil marks on the doorframe from when I was 5 years old. It was about the new sign I saw in the back of Blake's truck 2 days later. Price & Sons Design Center. Formerly Miller & Daughter. Formerly, my father was still alive. He was sitting in a rehab center trying to learn how to speak again after a stroke. But my husband and his family had already written him like a footnote. And when I found out why Blake needed to know where I was every minute of the day, I did not scream. I did not tear the bracelet off. I did not run to him demanding answers. I clipped it right back around my wrist, because 20 minutes later I was going to slip the real charm into another woman's purse. And my husband was going to hear the truth from the people he trusted more than his own wife. Before I tell you what happened, let me ask you something. Have you ever been standing inside your own family and still felt like a guest? Have you ever watched people use your name, your work, your grief, your loyalty, then act like you should be grateful for the crumbs? If you have, then you already know this story is not really about a bracelet. It is about dignity. It is about legacy. And it is about the moment a woman, everyone called too emotional, finally became calm enough to destroy their lies without raising her voice. My name is Hannah Miller Price. At least that was the name I used then. I was 32 years old, a middle school counselor in Cincinnati, Ohio, married to Blake Price, the kind of man neighbors described as hardworking, polite, and family-oriented. That was the version they saw. They saw Blake in clean work boots at church fundraisers. They saw him helping old ladies carry mulch at the community garden. They saw him on Facebook posting photos of kitchen remodels with captions like, "Built with pride, built for families." They did not see the way his smile disappeared when we got home. They did not hear how he said my name when I disagreed with him. Hannah. Soft. Warning. Like I was a dog about to step off the porch. Blake owned Price Renovations with his younger brother, Drew. It was a decent business, not rich, not fancy. They did bathroom repairs, kitchen updates, porch rebuilds, basement finishing. Regular American work for regular American families. But before there was a Price Renovations, there was Miller & Daughter Custom Cabinets. That was my father's business. Walter Miller started it in 1991 with 2 borrowed saws, a used pickup truck, and a notebook full of customer names written in pencil. The workshop sat behind our family house in Norwood, a long white building with a green roof, dusty windows, and a bell over the side door that jingled whenever someone walked in. That shop was my childhood. It was my mother bringing Dad coffee at sunrise. It was me doing homework on an upside-down bucket while Dad sanded cabinet doors. It was the smell of pine varnish and black coffee. It was customers stopping by with banana bread because Dad fixed a drawer for free when money was tight. It was my father tapping a tape measure against his palm and saying, "Measure twice, Hannah. Cut once. A person's word is the same way. Check it before you trust it." I wish I had remembered that before I married Blake. Blake met my father before he really met me. It was a 4th of July cookout at my cousin's house. Blake came with Drew because Drew was dating one of my cousin's friends at the time. Blake helped carry folding tables, complimented my aunt's potato salad, and spent nearly an hour asking Dad questions about cabinet hinges. Looking back, that was the first red flag. Not that he was interested, that he was too interested. He asked about suppliers. He asked about old customers. He asked whether Dad still kept paper invoices. He asked how many jobs came from referrals. I thought he admired my father. Now I know he was studying him. 3 months later, Blake started dropping by the shop with coffee. 6 months later, he was calling my father Walt. A year later, he proposed to me in that workshop, standing between two unfinished maple cabinets with my father crying beside the clamps. Back then, I thought Blake loved where I came from. I did not understand that some people look at a family and see love. Others look at a family and see access. My father had his stroke 2 years into my marriage. It happened on a Tuesday morning in October, while rain streaked down the school cafeteria windows, and two seventh-grade girls were crying in my office over a fight that had started on Snapchat. My phone buzzed 17 times before I could answer. By the time I reached the hospital, Dad was already in a bed, his left hand curled against his chest, his speech broken into pieces. The doctor asked, "Has he been under unusual stress?" I said yes, because he had been. In the months before the stroke, everything at Miller and Daughter started going wrong. A supplier who had worked with Dad for 20 years suddenly demanded full payment up front. 3 longtime customers canceled in 1 week. Bad reviews appeared online from people we could not find in any customer file. A local contractor Dad had trusted for years stopped answering his calls. One afternoon, I found Dad sitting alone at his workbench, staring at a stack of bills like they were written in another language. "I don't know what changed," he said. I put my hand on his shoulder. I did not know either. Blake did. After Dad's stroke, Blake became helpful. Too helpful. He called the insurance company. He talked to the bank. He met with suppliers. He told me I was too exhausted to deal with business decisions. He told my father slowly and kindly that price renovations could carry the shop for a while. "Just until Walt gets back on his feet," he said. 6 months later, the invoices changed. 9 months later, the customer phone number forwarded to Blake's office. 11 months later, my father's old sign came down for repair. It never went back up. When I asked Blake about it, he kissed my forehead in that patient way that made me feel 5 years old. "Hannah, sentiment doesn't pay supplier bills." That was one of his favorite sentences. Sentiment. That was what he called my father's life. My mother had passed away when I was 19, so after Dad's stroke, I had no one in my corner except Dad, and Dad could barely speak. Blake's family moved into the empty spaces. His mother, Virginia Price, started coming by with casseroles and opinions. His brother Drew started walking through the workshop like he owned the dust. And Madison Cole, Blake's office manager, began appearing in places an office manager did not need to be. Sunday dinners, supplier meetings, family photos, my anniversary dinner. Madison was 27, pretty in a sharp, polished way. She wore perfume that entered a room before she did. She had perfect nails, perfect hair, and the kind of smile that made you feel like you had already lost a competition you never agreed to enter. Virginia adored her. Drew flirted with her. Blake trusted her. And Madison looked at me like I was a piece of old furniture someone kept out of guilt. By my 4th anniversary, I had become a guest in my own life. The house Blake and I lived in was technically ours, but he chose the furniture. The workshop had been my father's, but Price family meetings happened there without me. The business Instagram used my father's old before and after photos, but Blake's name was on every caption. The family group chat was called Price Family Business, and I was not in it. At Thanksgiving, Virginia asked me to bring rolls, then posted a picture of the dinner table with the caption, "So thankful for my sons and the legacy they're building." I was in the kitchen when she took the photo. My hands were in dishwater. Only my elbow made it into the frame. That was my marriage in one picture. Useful, present, invisible. Our anniversary dinner was at the Maple Barrel, a nice restaurant near downtown with low lighting and wooden booths. Not rich people fancy, Cincinnati fancy. The kind of place where people go for anniversaries, birthdays, and promotions. Blake wore a navy blazer. I wore a cream dress because he said you look softer in light colors. Softer. Not happier. Not beautiful. Softer. Virginia joined us for dessert. So did Drew. So did Madison, carrying a little boutique gift bag and pretending she had not known exactly where we would be. "Oh my gosh," she said, sliding into the booth beside Blake. "I hope I'm not crashing." She was already taking off her coat when she said it. Virginia beamed. "Nonsense, Madison. You're practically family." Practically. I looked at Blake. He did not look back. After dessert, he gave me the bracelet. A silver chain, 3 charms, a tiny house, a heart, and a round charm engraved with 2 words, always home. Virginia put one hand on her chest. "Oh, Blake," she whispered. "That is the sweetest thing." Madison's smile did not reach her eyes. Blake fastened the bracelet around my wrist. The clasp clicked shut. "There," he said. "Now I can always keep my little wife safe." Madison glanced at him, just for a second. Then she looked down at her wine. The bracelet felt heavier than it should have. I told myself it was only my imagination. That night, after Blake went upstairs, I stood in the kitchen under the yellow light above the sink. The dishwasher hummed. The house was quiet. On the counter were 3 unpaid rehab bills for my father and one glossy postcard Blake's company had mailed that week. Price & Sons Design Center. Craftsmanship for the next generation. In the corner of the postcard, almost hidden, were the words, "Formerly Miller and Daughter." I stared at that word, formerly, like my father had died, like I had never existed. Then I turned my wrist. The round charm caught the kitchen light. That was when I saw the tiny black dot. The next morning I called in sick and drove to Nate's Fix-It Phone Repair on Glenway Avenue. Nate and I had gone to high school together. He used to fix cracked phone screens in the cafeteria for $20 and a bag of chips. Now he owned a small shop between a dry cleaner and a smoke shop with a hand-painted sign and a bell that stuck every time the door opened. He examined the bracelet under a magnifying lamp. His face changed. Not dramatically. That would have been easier. It just went still. "Hannah," he said, "where did you get this?" "My husband gave it to me." Nate did not answer. He reached for a tiny screwdriver. The charm opened with a soft metallic click. Inside was a battery, a tiny microphone, and a tracking chip smaller than my thumbnail. Nate leaned back. The shop smelled like soldered plastic and burnt coffee. "What does it do?" I asked. He swallowed. "Location, audio, maybe motion alerts. Whoever controls the app can see where you are and listen whenever they want." My wrist felt cold. "How long has it been recording?" "Hard to say, but the battery is new. If he gave it to you last night, then probably since last night." Last night. The anniversary. Madison's smile. Blake's sentence. "Now I can always keep my little wife safe." Nate looked at me carefully. "Hannah, whoever gave you this didn't want to protect you. They wanted to own you." I laughed once. A small, ugly sound. Then I stopped. "Put it back together." He stared. "Number." "Nate." "No, you need to take it off and you need to go to the police." "Put it back together." "You cannot keep wearing this." "Yes, I can." "Why would you?" "Because if Blake was watching me, then Blake believed I did not know. And for the first time in 4 years, I had something he did not." Nate put the charm back together. His hands were careful. Mine were not shaking. That surprised me. I had spent years crying in bathrooms after Sunday dinners. I had swallowed insults from Virginia with gravy still warm on my plate. I had pretended not to notice Madison's perfume on Blake's jacket. But in that little repair shop, looking at the tiny machine hidden inside my husband's gift, I did not feel weak. I felt awake. On my way home, I stopped at my father's rehab center. Dad sat near the window in the common room, a blanket over his knees, watching a bird feeder swing in the wind. His speech had improved a little, but words still came slowly. Some days they arrived like stones dragged uphill. I sat beside him and placed my hand over his. The bracelet caught the fluorescent light. Dad looked at it. His eyebrows drew together. "New?" he asked. "Anniversary gift." He touched the round charm with one finger. His hand trembled. Then he said softly, heavy, "I almost broke. Not because of the word. Because my father, half trapped in his own body, still saw what everyone else missed." "Yes," I whispered, "it is." Dad looked at me. "Measure twice," he said. I nodded. "Cut once." That night I wanted to rip the bracelet off. I wanted to run into the garage and scream until Blake's perfect mask cracked. I wanted to throw every Price family photo off the wall. But then I heard my father's voice in my head. "Measure twice. Cut once." So I did the hardest thing I had ever done. I smiled at my husband and let him believe I was still blind. Blake came home at 10:20, smelling like peppermint gum and Madison's perfume. I was folding laundry on the couch. He kissed the top of my head. "You okay?" "Just tired." His eyes dropped to the bracelet. "You're wearing it." "Of course," I said. "It's beautiful." There it was. That satisfied little smile. Not love. Ownership. 2 days later, I found out why he needed it. Blake left his tablet open on the kitchen counter while he went to the garage. A notification appeared at the top of the screen. Virginia Price. Did she question the bracelet? My body went cold. I looked toward the garage. The door was still closed. I tapped the message. A group chat opened. Not Price Family Business. A different one. Blake. Virginia. Drew. Madison. No Hannah. The last messages filled the screen. Virginia, keep her calm until Walter signs. She gets emotional around him. Drew Bank wants confirmation by Monday. Madison. If Hannah shows up at the signing, she'll ruin it. Blake, she won't. I can see where she is now. Virginia, good. After the Miller place is secured, we can stop pretending she has a say. Madison, what about the bracelet after? Blake, she won't need it long. Madison sent a laughing emoji. I read the messages 3 times. My ears rang. Walter signs. The Miller place. Stop pretending. I scrolled higher. There were photos. My father's workshop. The old house. An appraisal. A mock-up of the new sign. Price & Sons Design Center. Formerly Miller & Daughter. Under one photo, Madison had written, "Some families know how to grow." Virginia replied, "Exactly. Grief makes people sentimental. Blake saved what Walter couldn't. I nearly dropped the tablet. Saved what Walter couldn't." My father had built that shop before Blake knew the difference between oak and laminate. The garage door opened. I put the tablet back exactly where it had been and reached for a dish towel. Blake walked in carrying a toolbox. "Smells good," he said. I was cooking chicken soup. My mother's recipe. The one I made every Thursday because Blake said it made the house feel normal. He kissed my cheek. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stirred the pot. "Your mom coming Sunday?" I asked. "Probably." "And Madison?" He paused. "Only half a second. Maybe. We have paperwork to review." I smiled down at the soup. "Sounds important." "It is," he said. "This family's future. This family. Not my family. His." Sunday dinner at Virginia's house was where people came to be politely wounded. She lived in a brick ranch with plastic flowers on the porch, beige carpet, and a living room full of framed photos of Blake and Drew. Their school pictures, their Little League pictures, fishing trips, church picnics, one photo from my wedding. Blake dancing with his mother. I was in the background, blurred, holding my bouquet. That night, Virginia served pot roast and talked about the upcoming ribbon cutting like she was hosting the Oscars. "The mayor's assistant might come," she said proudly, "and maybe someone from the local paper." Drew grinned. Good exposure. Madison, who was somehow there again, leaned toward Blake. "We should post a transformation reel. People love before and after stories." She had already posted one that morning. I had seen it while sitting in the rehab parking lot. A photo of her standing inside my father's workshop, one hand on the old workbench. Caption: New chapter. Same heart. Some families know how to grow. Same heart. She had never met my mother. She had never swept sawdust off that floor. She had never watched my father work late because a customer needed cabinets before Christmas. But she stood there smiling in red lipstick, stealing the heart of the place one caption at a time. Virginia looked at me across the dinner table. "You don't mind, do you, Hannah? I mean, it was your father's little shop, but Blake has really turned it into something." Little shop. I set my fork down. The room quieted. Blake's eyes sharpened. There were 3 versions of me sitting in that chair. The old Hannah would have smiled and said, "Of course." The broken Hannah would have excused herself and cried in the bathroom. The woman wearing a microphone on her wrist looked at Virginia Price and said, "My father's shop fed 3 families for 30 years. That's not little." Drew coughed into his napkin. Madison's mouth tightened. Virginia gave a soft laugh. "Well, grief makes people sentimental." Blake added, "Mom means the business was struggling. That's just reality." I looked at him. "And your reality is that you needed the Miller name to make Price renovations look respectable." The table went silent. Drew's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Under the table, Blake's hand closed around my knee. A warning. I looked down at his hand, then back at his mother. Nobody spoke for 5 seconds. 5 seconds can change the temperature of an entire room. Blake leaned close. "Don't start," he whispered. I smiled. "Eat your dinner," I whispered back. His grip loosened. Across the table, Madison watched us carefully. Then her eyes flicked toward Drew. Just once. Too fast for anyone else to notice. But I noticed. A few minutes later, when Virginia got up for dessert, Madison dropped her napkin. Drew bent to pick it up at the same time. Their hands touched under the table. Madison smiled. Drew looked away too quickly. The old Hannah would have dismissed it. The new Hannah measured it. Twice. Over the next week I watched Madison avoid Blake's eyes whenever he mentioned our expansion. I watched Drew pay for her coffee with a card he hid from his wallet. I watched Madison and Drew stand too close beside the old lumber rack, then step apart when I walked in. I watched Blake see none of it. That was Blake's weakness. He believed everyone wanted what he had. He never imagined they might be using him too. On Wednesday afternoon, I walked into the workshop to drop off a box of old invoices Blake had asked me to find. Madison was sitting at my father's workbench. Not beside it, at it. The same workbench where Dad had taught me to sand wood with the grain. She had her laptop open, her purse on the floor, and one of my mother's old coffee mugs beside her hand. I stopped in the doorway. That's my father's bench. Madison looked up slowly. Oh, Blake said I could use it. Blake doesn't get to give away every piece of my childhood. She smiled. It was not a kind smile. Hannah, I know this is hard, but at some point you have to let the past become useful. Useful. That word told me everything. To Madison, my father's shop was useful. To Virginia, my grief was sentimental. To Blake, my silence was convenient. I walked to the bench and picked up my mother's mug. Madison's smile faded. That was here when I came in. It won't be when you come back. I took the mug and left. That night, Blake found me washing it in the kitchen. His jaw tightened. Madison said you were rude. Madison was sitting at my father's workbench drinking from my mother's mug. He sighed like I was a child refusing bedtime. Hannah, your father built cabinets. I'm building a future. I turned off the faucet. Water dripped from my hands. Say that again. He blinked. What? Say it again, slowly. His eyes dropped to the bracelet. He remembered he could listen. He softened his voice. I'm saying we have to move forward. No, I said. You said my father built cabinets like that was small. Blake's face hardened. Sentiment doesn't pay bills. There it is. He stepped closer. You want the truth. That shop was dying before I stepped in. I gave the Miller name a future. You should be thanking me, not embarrassing me. There. The sentence I needed. Not for a judge, not for a lawyer, for myself. The last small part of me that still wondered if I was overreacting finally went quiet. I had loved a man who thought my father's life was raw material. The ribbon cutting was scheduled for Saturday. Price and Sons Design Center, formerly Miller and Daughter. I helped set up because nobody asked if I wanted to. That was another Price family trick. They excluded me from decisions, then expected me for labor. At 8:30 a.m., I arrived with 2 trays of grocery store muffins, a box of coffee, and my father's old denim jacket folded over my arm. The workshop looked wrong. Fresh gray paint, new carpet near the front, a reception desk where Dad's lumber rack used to stand. The old smell of sawdust had been covered by lemon cleaner and new plastic. Blake stood near the entrance directing Drew where to hang balloons. Madison was arranging brochures on the welcome table. Virginia walked around with a clipboard like she owned oxygen. My father was not invited. When I had asked Blake why he said, honey, this might be too emotional for him. Translation. We do not want the old man here while we erase him, so I invited him myself. At 10:35, a medical transport van pulled into the parking lot. Blake saw it through the window. His face changed. Hannah, he said slowly, what did you do? I brought my father to his shop. Virginia's clipboard lowered. Madison looked toward the door. 2 attendants rolled Dad inside in his wheelchair. He wore a clean flannel shirt, his gray hair combed, his mouth slightly uneven from the stroke, but his eyes clear. I placed his denim jacket over his shoulders. Miller and Daughter was stitched above the pocket. People began whispering. Old customers recognized him immediately. Walter. Oh my goodness, Walt. Mr. Miller, it's so good to see you. Dad lifted one hand. The room shifted. Not dramatically. Just enough. The past had entered the building, and the past still had a face. Blake pulled me aside near the hallway. His voice stayed low, but anger sharpened every word. You should have asked me. I looked at him. For permission to bring my father to his own shop. This is not the day for drama. No, I said. It's the day for truth. His eyes dropped to my wrist. The bracelet was there. 3 charms. A tiny house. A heart. A round silver charm. At least that was what he saw. What he did not know was that Nate had helped me switch the real charm with an identical silver button from an old craft bracelet. The fake charm was on my wrist. The real charm was in my coat pocket, waiting. At 11:06, Madison walked past me with a stack of brochures and her oversized tan purse. She set the purse on a chair beside the back office and walked away to fix the ribbon outside. I moved. Not fast, not suspiciously, just a wife carrying empty coffee cups to the trash. The real charm slipped from my fingers into the open side pocket of Madison's purse. It made no sound. At 11:13, Madison grabbed her purse and walked toward the parking lot with Virginia. Blake stood near the front door, checking his phone. Then he froze. There it was, the moment the map betrayed him. The charm was moving away from me. His eyes shot to my wrist. He saw the fake charm, then back to his phone. Confusion, suspicion, panic. He tapped the screen. He was listening. He thought he was catching me. Instead, he heard his mother. In the parking lot, Virginia's voice came through clear. Keep smiling until Walter signs. After that, Hannah can cry all she wants. Madison laughed. She still thinks this is about family. It is about family, Virginia said. Mine. Madison lowered her voice. And after the house, we sell it. Blake needs the cash. Drew's supplier bills are worse than he admitted. A pause. Then Madison said, Blake doesn't know about Drew's second account, does he? Virginia snapped, keep your voice down. Madison laughed again. Oh, please. Blake only sees what he wants to see. He thinks I'm loyal because I flirt when he's stressed. Another pause. Then Madison said the sentence that broke him. Once the Miller property closes, I'm not staying with Blake anyway. Drew and I already talked. We take our cut and go to Florida. Blake's face went white. Not pale. White. He looked toward Drew, who was outside pretending to adjust the balloon arch. Then toward Madison. Then toward his mother. In 20 minutes, my husband learned what I had learned in 4 years. People who build betrayal into their lives should not be shocked when betrayal moves into the house. He walked outside so fast the front door slammed against the wall. Everyone turned. Through the window, I watched him cross the parking lot. Madison saw him coming. So did Virginia. Drew stepped back. Blake shouted. Madison shouted back. Virginia grabbed his arm. Drew threw both hands up. Guests stared. A few phones came out. The ribbon cutting was supposed to begin at noon. By 11:38, the Price family was fighting in the parking lot of the business they had stolen from my father. And my father sat quietly beside me, watching through the window. His hand found mine. Loud, he said. I squeezed his fingers. Yes, Dad. He looked around the workshop, at the new sign, at the brochures, at the customers whispering. Then he said slowly, not theirs. 2 words. That was all. But those 2 words filled my chest like oxygen. At noon, Blake came back inside. His face was tight. His hair was messy from running his hands through it. Madison was gone. Drew was gone. Virginia stood near the front window, crying angry tears into a napkin. The room was full of neighbors, old customers, relatives, and local business owners pretending not to know what they had just witnessed. Blake walked straight to me. You, he said under his breath. I tilted my head. Me? You did this! I looked at the bracelet on my wrist. No, Blake. You did. You put the device on me. You opened the app. You listened. I just stopped being the only person punished by it. His eyes burned. You think you're clever? No, I said. I think I'm done. He laughed once, bitter and ugly. Done with what this house, this business. You don't have anything without me. The room got quiet. Not completely. Just enough. Enough that people heard him. Enough that my father heard him. Enough that Mrs. Donnelly, an old customer standing near the coffee table, turned around slowly. Blake noticed too late. But arrogant men often mistake silence for permission, so he kept going. Your father was drowning before I stepped in, Blake said. That shop was dying. I gave the Miller name a future. You should be thanking me, not embarrassing me. Something inside me went still. Not numb. Still. Like a lake before a storm. Then Mrs. Donnelly stepped forward. She was 71 years old, barely 5 feet tall, with white hair, a cane, and the kind of voice that had probably raised 4 children without needing to shout. Blake Price, she said, you ought to be ashamed of yourself. Blake turned. Excuse me. She pointed her cane toward the back of the shop. Walter Miller built my kitchen in 1998 when my husband was dying of cancer. He refused to take full payment until 6 months after the funeral. He said a woman shouldn't have to choose between cabinets and medicine. The room went silent. Mrs. Donnelly's eyes filled with tears, but her voice did not shake. Don't you dare stand in his shop and call him a sick old man with a dead business. That man had more honor in one hand than you have in your whole family. Virginia gasped. Mrs. Donnelly, that is unfair. The old woman turned on her. No, Virginia. What's unfair is watching you people use his name while pushing his daughter out of the frame. That was the moment everything changed. Not because of me. Because someone else finally said out loud what everyone had been feeling. A murmur moved through the room. Small at first, then larger. People looked at the sign. Formerly Miller and daughter. People looked at my father. People looked at Blake. Respect left the room quietly, but once it left him, everyone noticed. Blake tried to recover. Hannah is upset, he said loudly. This has been a difficult season for all of us. She's confused. There it was. The last weapon. Make the woman sound unstable. Make her pain sound like confusion. Make her truth sound like drama. I walked to the front of the room. The microphone for the ribbon cutting sat on a small podium. Madison had tested it earlier. I tapped it once. A soft thump echoed through the speakers. Blake's eyes widened. Hannah, he warned. I faced the room. My name is Hannah Miller, I said. For 4 years, I let people tell me I should be grateful for the way they treated me. Grateful when they made decisions without me. Grateful when my father's name disappeared. Grateful when my work became invisible. Grateful when my grief made them uncomfortable. Nobody moved. Virginia stood near the window, mascara smudged. Good. For months, I thought losing a family happened all at once. I continued. Like a death. Like a fire. But sometimes it happens slowly. A missed invitation. A group chat without your name. A photo where you are almost in the frame but not quite. A dinner where everyone talks around you. A business sign changed before anyone asks if your father is ready to see it. My voice did not shake. That was the part I am proudest of. Not the plan. Not the charm. Not the look on Blake's face. My voice. Steady. Mine. This building was Miller and Daughter before it was anything else I said. My father built cabinets here before Blake Price knew how to hold a level. My mother packed lunches here. I did homework on that back counter. Some of you bought your first kitchen table from my dad. Some of you called him when a drawer broke and he came after dinner because that is who he was. An older man near the door removed his cap. Mrs. Donnelly wiped her eyes. This is not about revenge, I said. Revenge would be me wanting them to suffer. This is about telling the truth in the room where they tried to bury it. Blake stepped toward me. Dad's wheelchair moved. Only a few inches, but enough. He pushed himself forward with his good hand. The attendant moved to help, but Dad lifted one finger. Number. He wanted to do it himself. The room watched him roll slowly toward the podium. I lowered the microphone. Dad's mouth worked. The whole room waited. Finally, he said my shop. 2 words. Then another. My daughter. Virginia whispered, Oh, Walter. Dad turned his head toward her. It took effort, but he did it. No, he said. 1 word. The strongest word I had ever heard. Number. No to being erased. No to being pitied. No to being used. No to theft dressed up as help. No to people who called control, love, and greed family. Blake looked around the room and saw it happening. Memory returning to my father. Respect returning to my name. People adding up what they had ignored. He lowered his voice. Stop this right now. I looked at him, really looked at him. The man I had married. The man who once stood in my father's workshop and promised to protect me. The man who turned protection into surveillance. Help into theft. Marriage into a business plan. No, I said, I won't. Then I unclasped the bracelet from my wrist. The fake charm caught the light. I held it up. Explain this. Blake's face changed. I continued. Explain why you gave me a bracelet with a tracker in it. Explain why your family chat said you needed to know where I was until my father signed away his property. Explain why Madison knew about it. Explain why your mother said I could cry after Walter signed. Virginia's voice cracked. That is not fair. We were trying to protect the business. No, I said. You were trying to protect yourselves from the woman whose name you needed but whose presence embarrassed you. That one landed. I saw it in her face. Because it was true. They needed Miller. They did not want Hannah. They needed the legacy. They did not want the daughter. Blake stepped closer. His voice was low now. You'll regret making me look bad. The microphone caught every word. The room heard him. All of him. Not the husband. Not the businessman. Not the community man. The small angry man underneath. I smiled sadly. That is the most honest thing you've said all year. Then I removed my wedding ring. Not dramatically. Not throwing it. Not crying. I simply placed it on the podium beside the microphone. A small sound. Metal against wood. The quietest ending a marriage can have. I am leaving you, I said. And I am taking back my name. The room breathed. I did not wait for applause. This was not a movie. In real life, people do not always cheer when a woman finally stands up. Sometimes they look uncomfortable because her courage reminds them of every time they stayed quiet. I walked to my father, put my hand on his shoulder, and together with the attendant's help, we left the building. Behind us, Blake called my name once. Hannah. I stopped at the door but did not turn around. For years, I had turned around every time he said my name. In grocery stores, at family dinners, in arguments, in bed, in hallways. Like my name belonged to his mouth. That day I let it fall behind me. Outside, the sun was too bright. The kind of September light that shows dust on windows and truth on faces. Dad's wheelchair rolled over the cracked pavement. At the van, he reached for my hand. Proud, he said. I bent down and pressed my forehead to his hand. That was when I cried. Not inside, not in front of Blake, not when Virginia insulted me, not when Madison laughed. I cried when my father said he was proud. Because sometimes the heart does not break when people hurt you. It breaks when someone finally sees you surviving it. The next few weeks were ugly. Not movie ugly. Real ugly. Boxes in the hallway. Voicemails at midnight. Virginia leaving messages that began with "I love you like a daughter" and ended with "after everything we did for you." Drew disappeared for 9 days, then came back when suppliers started calling. Madison deleted her social media, but not before half the town had seen the parking lot video someone posted. Blake sent flowers to the school where I worked. I gave them to the front office. He texted, "You misunderstood." Then, "We can fix this." Then, "You're destroying both families." Then finally, "You'll regret making me look bad." Again. That sentence became the cleanest truth of my marriage. He was not sorry he tracked me. He was not sorry he used my father. He was not sorry he let his mother humiliate me. He was sorry people saw him. That told me everything. I moved into my father's old house, the one with the porch that sagged on the left side, the one where my mother's rose bushes had grown wild, the one where the kitchen cabinet still had pencil marks inside from when Dad measured twice and cut once. For the first few nights, I slept on a mattress in the living room because the bedroom felt too full of memories. The house creaked. The pipes knocked. The furnace sounded like an old man clearing his throat. And I loved every imperfect inch of it. Nate came by on a Saturday with pizza and helped change the locks. Mrs. Donnelly brought soup. 2 former customers asked if Dad was taking small jobs again. At first I laughed. Dad could barely hold a pencil. I had a full-time job. The shop was tangled in bills and bad paint and the damage Blake left behind. But the question stayed with me. Small jobs. A cabinet door. A broken drawer. A table refinished for a granddaughter's wedding. Not an empire. Not a design center. Not a brand built on stolen history. Just work. Honest work. Blake came by once in December. I saw his truck pull into the driveway just before dusk. For 1 second, my body reacted the old way. Stomach tight. Mouth dry. Hands cold. Then I looked down at my bare wrist. No bracelet. No leash. No one listening. I opened the door but did not invite him in. He looked thinner. Less polished. His beard had grown in unevenly. I heard about the workshop program, he said. I said nothing. That's good, he continued. Your dad would like that. My dad does like it. He flinched. Good. Not because I wanted him in pain. Because I wanted him to remember my father was still alive. Still present. Still more than a tool in Blake's plan. Blake looked past me into the house. The Christmas tree stood in the corner, decorated with old ornaments from my childhood. Paper angels. Wooden stars. A tiny painted cabinet Dad had made for me when I was 7. I miss us, Blake said. I almost laughed. Us. What a small word for such a large lie. There was no us, I said. There was you and there was what you needed from me. His face hardened. You really believe that? I lived it. He looked down. For 1 second, he seemed almost human. I made mistakes. No, I said gently. You made choices. His eyes lifted. There was the difference. Mistakes are things you drop. Choices are things you build. And Blake had built an entire marriage around taking. I loved you, he said. I wanted that sentence to matter. Some small wounded part of me still wanted it to unlock the past and make everything softer. But love without respect is just hunger wearing perfume. No, I said. You loved access. You loved my father's name. You loved how quiet I became when your mother corrected me. You loved that I kept trying to earn a seat at a table built from my own wood. He had no answer. So I gave him the last thing I owed him. Nothing. I closed the door. Not slammed. Closed. That matters. Slamming means you still want the other person to hear your anger. Closing means you are done explaining. A year later, Dad stood for the first time without holding the parallel bars. Only 7 seconds. But 7 seconds can be a miracle when the world once told you the story was over. The whole room cheered. Nate pretended he had sawdust in his eye, even though there was no sawdust anywhere near him. Mrs. Donnelly cried openly. Dad sat back down exhausted and smiling. Then he looked at me. Daughter, he said. I knelt beside him. Yes, Dad. Sign. I knew what he meant. The next weekend we hung a new sign above the workshop door. Not Price and Sons. Not Design Center. Not formerly Miller and Daughter. The new sign said, Miller and Daughter Community Workshop. Underneath in smaller letters I painted Dad's favorite sentence. Measure twice, cut once. People from the neighborhood came. No mayor. No newspaper. No ribbon. Just folding chairs. Lemonade grocery store cookies. Teenagers showing crooked birdhouses. Old customers hugging my father and sunlight pouring through the open garage doors. At one point, a boy from my school named Marcus held up a lopsided wooden shelf and apologized 6 times. Dad tapped the shelf with one finger. Strong, he said. Marcus smiled like someone had handed him a new name. That was legacy, not a sign, not an account, not a business card. Legacy was what remained in people after you treated them with care. Later that afternoon, I stood outside and looked at the building. The green roof still needed repair. The paint was uneven near the west wall. One window stuck whenever it rained. It was not perfect, but it was ours. My father rolled up beside me. For a while, we just looked. Then he said, home. I smiled. Yes, I said, home. I think about that bracelet sometimes. Not because I miss it, because it taught me something. Control often arrives disguised as care. A husband saying, I just want to keep you safe. A mother-in-law saying, we're only trying to help. A family saying, don't be difficult. A business saying, it's just practical. A photo where you are almost in the frame but not quite. You can lose yourself slowly that way. One polite insult at a time. One swallowed answer. One dinner where you laugh at the joke that cuts you. One day you wake up and realize you have become the help in a life built from your own inheritance. But here is what I learned. Dignity does not always roar. Sometimes dignity is a woman quietly taking off a bracelet. Sometimes it is a sick father saying one word into a microphone. Sometimes it is an old customer standing up with a cane and telling the truth everyone else was afraid to say. Sometimes it is closing a door without slamming it. Sometimes it is rebuilding something small and honest from the wreckage of something stolen. Family is not the people who use your name while erasing your face. Legacy is not a building. It is not money. It is not a sign over a door. Legacy is the respect you leave behind in the people who trusted you. And self-worth is the moment you stop begging people to see your value and start living like you already know it. So if you are listening to this and someone in your life keeps calling control love, ask yourself one question. Do they want you safe or do they want you small? Because there is a difference. And the day you learn that difference may be the day you finally come home to yourself. If this were you, what would you have done when you found the tracker inside the bracelet? Would you confront him immediately, or would you stay quiet and let the truth expose itself? Tell me in the comments. And if you have ever been made to feel like an outsider in your own family, I hope you remember this. Being erased by the wrong people does not mean you disappeared. Sometimes it means you are finally ready to write your own name back where it belongs.